My name is Christine Gockel. Thank you for inviting me to answer some questions about leadership. I work as professor of work and organizational psychology at SRH, Berlin University of Applied Sciences. And there I teach classes in psychology to entrepreneurs and management students. I got my PhD at Michigan State University in the United States and have work experience from the United States, Switzerland, and Germany. I'm now based in Berlin. I also work as business coach. That means I work with leaders and teams so that they can produce positive results and remain flexible in times of change. So two aspects are important when it comes to effective leadership. The first aspect is that leaders have to be concerned about the results. That means they need to explain to their team members what the goals are, what the tasks are, how the tasks need to be accomplished, by whom and when, and they need to follow up on that. They need to make sure that things get done. The second aspect that makes a leader effective is concern for people. That means leaders have the development and the well-being of their team members in mind when deciding who does what and when, and also when deciding how team members can develop their skills further. This sounds so simple. In fact, it is not, because these two dimensions, concern for results and concern for people, are independent of each other. That means an effective leader has both concern for results and at the same time is concerned about the well-being and development of his or her team members. In the best case, the leader shows both to a high extent. What is important here is that in times of stress, leaders tend to stress one dimension more than another. When I work with leaders, I usually ask them, okay, what do you tend to do when things become difficult? Do you tend to focus more on the task, and do you tell your team members, now these things need to get done no matter what, under time pressure? Or do you tend to focus more on your team members in times of stress, that you say, okay, I know this is difficult for you, so you rather take over the tasks as a leader yourself? And obviously, in the short term, this is possible to focus more on one aspect over another. But in the long term, as an effective leader, you need to have both in mind. I would like to point out two important approaches. The first one is leader-member exchange, and the second one is leading virtual teams. So leader-member exchange, what does that mean? The basic idea behind this approach is that leaders develop individual relationships with each of their team members. And that means there is no one leadership style that is appropriate for all team members at the same time. Usually team members have, leaders have team members who they trust very much, and they have very close relationships with these team members. They exchange a lot of information and other resources with these team members. For example, they go to lunch more often if you work in an office face-to-face. And these team members have the opportunity to produce very good results because they are very well informed and they know better what the leader expects. And then there are other team members who have more distant relationships. So they do not get as much information. They have the basic idea of what is required of them, but they are not part of the in-group. So they realize that the leader doesn't trust them as much, and they also might not get along with the leader on a personal level as the other team members who are very close to the leader. And what's important here as a leader is to realize who is close to you. Why is that the case? Maybe do you like some team members more because they are similar to you? They share certain attributes, and why are some team members more distant? If you have an overview of who's close, who's more distant, then you need to think about, do you need to change this in order for the team to be more successful? Do you want to change this? Do you want to pull some members closer to you into the team than before? Maybe that's not necessary. Maybe it's okay that some team members have more distant relationships with you. But the bottom line is that some team members have the opportunity to be much more effective because they receive more information and other resources than others. And as a leader, you can change this. So think about what kind of leadership, what kind of kinds of information resources team members need from you in order to work effectively as individuals and also as team members. The second approach I want to mention concerns leading virtual teams. So after 1.5 years of working from home, when this is recorded, it's September 2021, we haven't met many colleagues face to face. And that means as a leader, you need to be able to create trust and a basis for collaboration while leading virtually. The team members might be in different countries. That means they sit in different time zones, they have different cultural backgrounds, they speak different languages, and so on. And that makes it difficult to create a team, to create commitment and cohesion, because not as much information is exchanged in the team. So everything that concerns emotions, feelings, well-being, you do not see as much as a team leader, and you also do not send these kinds of information as much. So here it's important as a team leader to keep in mind how important trust is when developing a team, when setting the stage for good performance, and to spend a lot of time on the development of trust. It might seem unimportant at the beginning because everyone wants to focus on the task, but in the long run, it is necessary, because when times get tough and you need to give feedback to people, this basis of trust is necessary so that people accept feedback and that they continue working in the team. So there are many contemporary leadership roles, and that means as a leader, you have a complex task, but you are able to manage it. Let me point out the most important leadership roles. First of all, you are the boss. So you are responsible for making sure the tasks get done, your team reaches the goals, and you are also responsible for the development and well-being of your team members, as I mentioned before. Then second, you are an expert. Probably that means your team members ask you specific questions and they want to know specific answers. If you are not an expert in an area, it's important to make that clear and to make clear to the team who is the expert, who can answer these questions, and who needs all the incoming information in that area. You are also a coach. That means it's important for you to make sure your team members can work independently and that they are engaged, that they know this project is not your project, it's also their project, and they are accountable for results. Then also you are the facilitator. That means when your team has conflicts, you need to make sure that the process of dealing with the conflict is managed well. In other words, it's much better to be in the role of moderator in these situations and to make sure that everyone has a voice, can participate in the solution of the conflict, in making decisions and in implementing them. You are also an entrepreneur. That means you need to make sure that your company survives and meets certain standards. Finally, you are a change agent, because you need to make sure that in these uncertain times when there's lots of ambiguity, things are changing very quickly, your team or your company also changes quickly and adapts to the situation. So you need to make sure where your team members can work, that they have the appropriate equipment, resources, that they know how to interact with each other, and that they can adapt quickly to these changes. And depending on the structure and the processes in your organization, you might also be a colleague to other leaders, and you can share information with them about leading, the challenges of leading, the benefits of leading, and they might also ask you for advice. So yes, those are quite a few roles, as you just heard. In my experience with leaders, many conflicts and some confusion start when people are in different roles. So, or when your team members expect a different role from you than you are having at the moment. So sometimes a team member might ask you what to do. So they might expect you to be in the boss position. So they want to hear, this is your next task. And you might think, okay, they want the answer from you as an expert. So you might go into a lot of detail and explain everything, because you might be quite enthusiastic about something. And so for that team member, it might be way too much information, and they might say, well, okay, just tell me what to do. And that's that conflict starts because they expect you to be in the role of boss and you answer in the role of expert. Or for example, other team members might expect you to be in the role of coach. They don't want to receive specific answers from you. They just want to know how they can work more independently and how they can make more progress. And you might think, okay, they want the specific instructions and they don't need that at the moment. So there can be some conflict. And what I usually suggest when conflicts forms and develop is to try to think about, is this maybe a role conflict? Were you in a certain role that you thought was appropriate in that situation, and your team members expected a very different role? So sustainability usually means you are able to meet your own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And I, as a psychologist by training, read this and would say, when you transfer this to leadership, that means you, as a leader, need to make sure that you meet your company's goals without compromising the ability of your team members to meet their individual goals. And that can be challenging, because that means you need to take into account each individual team member's background. So you need to make sure that you know what their knowledge and their skills are, what their wishes are for the position, for their contributions to the company, and what their personal background is. and also what they have in mind. So that is a complex task, but that means if you do this, if you treat your team members as the most important resource you have, and you say you also want sustainability in this regard, that people do produce good results, but at the same time, they remain healthy and they remain happy, or at least content, when working on these tasks, then you are an effective sustainability leader from the psychologist's point of view. I would say the most important thing you can do is to take into account more perspectives when leading and when working on specific projects. That means, first of all, clearly you have your own perspective, and you might be very certain about what needs to be done and why. And you might also be able to explain this very clearly to your team members. Then it's important to take into account your team members' perspectives, and they are usually more dissimilar than you think as a leader. There's lots and lots of research in psychology that shows how different the view of the leader is from the team members' perspective. And on average, leaders tend to have a more optimistic view than team members. So the most important advice I can give you is ask your team members about how they view things, why they came to certain conclusions, and what they would like to do differently. And that means you need to be able to establish a feedback culture in your team. First of all, as a leader, you need to be able to give feedback because you are a role model. Every team member looks at you and tries to find out how you communicate, how you give feedback. If you give feedback, it's important to focus on behavior and to say to people specifically why you liked their results. So yes, it's nice to hear, hey, Christine, you did a great job. But for Christine as a team member, it would be more important to know what exactly she did so well. So you can say, I liked that you paid so much attention to the following details. That's more specific. And if you as a leader give feedback, your team members are also better able to give you feedback as a leader and to tell you what you as a leader did well and what they might have missed and what you can do differently in the next project or in the next cycle of events. So it's important to have an open ear to your team members' voices in order to become a better leader. And sometimes that's tough because obviously your team members will tell you things that you didn't do so well and that you might know about, but only then do you have the ability to change and to become better. Also, finally, I would say, do not be afraid to ask for help. So ask colleagues if you struggle, if you don't know what to do, or ask a coach like me, for example, and go to workshops to develop your leadership skills. And what I notice in my coaching sessions with leaders is that it's very valuable for them to have somebody who listens, somebody from the outside who tries to understand what is going on and who provides a different perspective. And if you have that different perspective, either from a professional coach or a different perspective from your team members, if you have an open feedback culture, then are you able to be more effective and produce better results.